Thank you for inviting us. For us, it's very important to be here because we just finished to analyze our data. This is a fresh fieldwork research, and so really interesting for us to be with, sharing this result with you. And we also hope that we may inspire the discussion of these days with maybe new interpretation of reintegration patterns of return migrants. So thank you very much, Nuri and Robert, for inviting Tilo. And so I cannot promise that I will be able to answer to meet this title that was sort of given to us, but I hope that I'm gonna provide you some useful information that come from the ground. This presentation is about I'm gonna first to provide you to illustrate the results of the field work that have been made in 2012. In 3 countries with very different political and socio-economic contexts, which are Mali, Tunisia, and Armenia. And this research follow another research that was made in the Maghreb countries in 2005-2006. This time we decided to go beyond the regional homogeneity, and we try to figure out and check whether there are patterns of reintegration across very different cultural and political context. First of all, I'm going to provide a rationale of the research, data collection tools, or some methodology, but very shortly, I want to introduce you to the return migrants we have interviewed. Then I'm going to present you an hypothesis how we can build reintegration indicators. We present you the results of the calculation of these indicators and some discussion and policy suggestion that come from these analysis. For today, I'm going to present the last research. CRIS is a cross-regional information system. It's actually is a project that situated within the return, migration, and development platform. It's a website actually where you can find lots of information, data, statistics. It's also recently uploaded an extensive analysis and classification of readmission agreements. We collected and analyzed more than 300 readmission agreements around the world, and this is quite important for us because, as you know, return migration has been very often predominantly referred to a voluntary return or assisted voluntary return. Has to do with the expelled and removed migrants. Whether our attention is on what we, as sociologists, consider return migrants, as on those who have decided, of course, they are not totally free from constraints, political constraints, etc. Of course, we include also those migrants who had to return, go back home because expelled and removed. So for us, the readmission agreement it's also part of this broader research strategy. And so it's a sort of a knowledge-sharing platform, and our main research question is to explain why do some return migrants succeed in reintegrating back home better than others, and why do patterns of reintegration vary so much. This is I want to try to answer to respond to this question. The focus is here today is on the construction and elaboration of synthetic indicators. As you see, we have different contexts, and we found out interesting commonalities among these different return migrants in terms of reintegration. Sorry, I just Okay. This is important to read together this definition, because this is the definition that we use, and we used for the direct face-to-face interviews we made with more than 1,000 migrants, return migrants in these countries. This is an adaptation, as is drawn on a definition provided by the United Nations. And is any person returning to his country of origin over the last 10 years? Over the last 10 years, because it's the migration cycles to be better, assessed by the migrant himself. Because it's still quite close to this experience, and of course, at the time of the survey, to be returned at least for 3 months, in order to avoid those who return for visiting, like families. So this is quite important to have, and we applied strictly this definition, and we've been monitoring the sampling strategies. As you know, we don't have data on return migrants, so this should be seen as a sort of explorative research. Of course, we had sort of geostratification strategies, and we try to include different categories of returnees in terms of gender, in terms of their position in labor market. However, and then the second concept, the second notion is reintegration, which is a quite broad definition. This allows us to be quite flexible in assessing through using several indicators, and this is almost the same concept of reintegration I think you have. I would add that in our research we also paid attention to social political participation. Then you will see that it's quite important indicators to explain also why some migrants are better reintegrated than others. This is the questionnaire we used. We don't need to go through. We don't have time to go through all the dimensions. But the main concept I want to share with you is that our idea is that we are interested in understanding the migration cycle of return migrants. So before emigrating, during they stay abroad, and after return, and at the time of the survey. So in between these 3 main stages, we have also a sort of middle situation of the migrants that we considered even when elaborating statistical indicators. So we can evaluate the changes in the labor market situation, in family situation, in the motivation, decision, and aspiration of migrants across the migration cycle. For us, migration, the return is not necessarily the end of a migration cycle. It's, of course, not the end of the migration cycle for those who were removed and expelled and they wish to re-immigrate, but it's not also the end of a migration cycle for many of those who are still maintaining cross-border relations. That is the case of Mali, for instance, especially, where we see a sort of a pattern of circular migration. That's also the case of many Armenians that return back home, but still, planning to remigrate, but not just temporarily, because they have some business in both countries, etc. So the return is not the end of the migration cycle, and I think this concept should be considered even in your project, because those people are, of course, they have a right, human rights, to move and to remigrate, but it's also part of what we got from bottom research. And so this is the rationale. I want to introduce you to the migrants we interviewed once they went back home. I said that we have almost 1,000 interviews in our database, and most of them emigrated, or for most of them, the migration cycle corresponded to the active life in terms of labor market. So most of them are in this between 25 and 55 years old, and no major differences. This is what the marital family situation, let's say. It's interesting to observe. We start to see some, important difference where in Mali and in Tunisia, most of the migrants emigrated were single, and for them forming a family was part of the migration cycle. In the Mali, building a family is one of the main achievement of these migrants. As you know, the family is a very key social institution in Mali, and extended family it's still very important. Whether in Armenia, because many of them went to Russia, but also many of them went to France. We will see in a short. For them, it's the situation. It's a bit different. They were most of them they were married before emigrating. They left the family there. Sometimes we see family reunification, but most of the time we see that these migrants circulate, between the two countries. So we have like evidence of sort of circular migration on the one hand. On the other hand, we have evidence of migrants who really, stay abroad for quite long. As you see, here we have especially Armenian. This is the duration of return migration. Armenian stay short times abroad compared to Tunisian and Malian. They mainly go to Russia and France, where the Malian, Tunisian, they stay bit longer abroad, and for Malians, most of them have returned from Côte d'Ivoire. Thank you. And whether Tunisian, as you, it's quite evident, many of them went to France, to Italy, but also we have a large share of migrants that return from Libya after the crisis. So we have many in Mali and Tunisia. We interviewed many return migrants that returned after the last 2 years crisis, and in the case of Mali, also after the post-electoral crisis in Côte d'Ivoire in 2001, 2002. The reason why they immigrated is mixed for the three national groups. It's a combination of economic and family reasons, but here in the case of Armenia, which is interesting, is and also is quite widely known, because they don't feel they have a future prospects in their country. And we see this kind of deception, let's say, or the disappointment and mistrust in the future in their country come back again after they return, and one of the motivation why they want to re-immigrate. And whether for Mali, it's really a combination. We have mainly breadwinner men that went abroad looking for a job, whether the women mainly for joining. It's a sort of family reunification, but they also many of them, they also worked abroad. So it's a sort of combination. It's again for the Tunisian. Here in the case of Tunisian, we got a lot of students, because that's a practical reason. Whether the first survey in 2005 got quite different typologies of migrants, we were interested, because it's a second round there, we were interested to get more students. So in the case of Tunisia, this is a bias, let's say, so you have to take into consideration that most of them are students that went abroad and they went back. I think it's interesting for you to compare. And this is, for me, this is the very key slide, because what we have done so far is first we asked them whether they decide or not to return. Actually, the question was, did you decide, or whether your return was imposed, forcé, imposed by the circumstances. And this is the first classification. Then we ask them to list numbers of reasons why they decide to return or why they were compelled to return. Basing on this kind of, let's say, bottom-up approach, we could build a typology which include 3 types. The last one is compelled, that's those who did not decide to return, but they had to return. Many of them because they were removed or expelled, but also because they had administrative problem, they had to interrupt their studies. They also, in the case of Mali, let's say, we also have cases of persons that are forced to marry. So especially women, they had to return in the, and also we have a war conflict. So this is kind of a return which is take place under high pressure. And the migration cycles we define was abruptly interrupted. The second, the middle types, is those migration cycles was not completed, but not was abruptly interrupted. And these are those who decided to return, but under some pressure or owing to unfavorable circumstances like precariousness, family problems, health problems, racism and discrimination. Of course, then we have a quite important category, which is homesickness, and then because you cannot classify, we have checked whether homesickness came together with good or bad reason for the return. And then the first one of those migration cycle was completed. I put some emphasis on these slides because we will see this is one of the explain most of the variance in the regression model, but also that I not present here the regression model, but in the correlation and test. So this is a kind of really explanatory factors. So the reintegration indicators include 3 dimensions. One dimension is social and family reintegration. We include indicators of family contacts, to which extent they maintain family contacts while abroad, family visits, to which extent they talked about the return with their family and friends, so to which extent the return was shared. And socialize with their kins, family support, whether during the migration cycles, to which extent they were supported by the family materially, but also psychologically, morally, and etc. And also, the last point is returnees, the family and social context back home. We included some indicators that tell us whether they found out in the welcoming environment, like we observed, for instance, in the case especially for Mali, that after return, they suffered the envy, suspicious of family members. A lot of them asked for money, or like sort of pressure. So we also consider this kind of friendly social context once they return back home. Professional economic reintegration, time spent to find a job during the migration cycles, changes in occupational status. We also observe through the ISCO code, like a job classification, whether they had an evolution, improvements in getting and gaining high qualified professions. Financial situation, this is a subjective assessment of whether the situation today is better than before, etc. A social protection coverage, formal and informal forms of social security, because this is important in Mali, where they have association cooperatives that provide them with some sort of social security system, and the investments, of course. And then we have civic and political actions, demonstration, take part in strikes, etc., and membership to political social organization. Again, so that's a result, very briefly, integrate better than other, if we take these indicators alone. In terms of civic and political participation, what is interesting is that whether if civic and political action, like vote to the elections, we don't see much difference in the 3 countries. In terms of membership, we saw that Mali is very important, and we know there's a lot of wider literature that's telling that in Mali, this kind of, the communitarian association are really the basic structure of social organization in Mali, so it's not surprising that most of them were member of association, whether in Armenia we didn't see any kind of actually civic engagement in a way, whether in Tunisia should be, we should be read with caution because it just, is a post-dictatorship situation. The survey took place just 1 year, 2 years after the revolution. So it's not, but it's interesting to see that it's gonna be important to explain together with other factors why patterns of reintegration. And the last one is the results for professional and economic reintegration. We see a good situation for Tunisian, and we saw that we already said that because many of them were students, and so let's say skilled and high qualified return migrants. But Mali also was very important for them, the migration cycle, the migration experience. Most of them achieved to improve the economic and professional situation. At least they made a lot of efforts. Whether in Armenia, they just, and we have many indicators, they just go back home and many of them, they don't look for a job, they just live with the money, the remittances and the money they had because they expect to remigrate in a short time, or because there is a lack of a perspective, a lack of corruption. So also there are kind of problems, structural problems that limit the engagement in the economic life once back home in Armenia. And this is a scatter plot just to show you that Armenian has on your left side, and so they also got negative scores on the indicators, whether Tunisian and Mali, most of them are in the right part, so let's say they made some improvement. When we're going to correlate these synthetic indicators, we see that professional economic reintegration goes together with social family reintegration and civic political reintegration. So those who are more socially and family reintegrated, they receive the family support, they found out quite welcoming environment once back home, they've been quite active as citizens in formal or informal political and social life, they find a way to better reintegrate economically and professionally better than others. It's interesting to see, we made some tests distinguishing between the countries, and we saw that gender is an issue mainly in Mali, but it's not an issue in Armenia and in Tunisia. Of course, we have a bias here, but in Mali it's quite important, and we saw that females, women in Mali, mainly follow the breadwinners, members of the family. And about human capital, it's quite important, but it's not overall so important. And the regression model is also explained this. So when we look at the more broader category of return migrants, so every return migrants, we see that education is important, of course, but it's not the only one. So we should not really focus only on, it's just one of the resources they can mobilize to reintegrate. It's important, I'm going to finish. And this is also interesting, the duration of migration cycles seems to not be very important, which is quite contradict what had been uncovered until now from the literature. We have to actually go more in depth in investigating this dimension. Maybe we have a bias here. What about compelled return? This is important in Mali and in Tunisia, and it's scored quite high. So those who were compelled to return, they are less economically and professionally reintegrated. The case of why it's not significant in Armenia is because we have there a sort of compensation effect of assisted return voluntary programs. Even they don't change really the situation of these migrants. They may compensate for a lack of other kind of tools, resources, and perspectives, but also when I checked it more deeply, let's say, I found out that it's not significant, even because we have most of the Armenian back home, they don't just look for jobs or they're employed and they're waiting for re-immigrate, that's why. And you see assisted voluntary return programs, which are address expelled or removed in most of the cases, expelled or removed migrants are not significantly correlated. So we don't see the add value of these programs in terms of economic and professional reintegration. Of course, we have different typologies of programs and further investigation needs. That's also a sort of control variables. We checked whether professional economic reintegration was correlated with satisfaction about migration experience. We just asked them whether they were satisfied. We just happy to be back home and satisfied with the immigration experience. We see it's important in Mali and Tunisia, whether in Armenia probably they have been integrating migration in their daily life. So for them it's not really important. This variable, whether happy to be back home is important for everybody. I want to, to address you the attention to the last point, intention to re-immigrate at the time of disarmament. So, at the time of disarmament, we asked, are you planning or you wish to re-immigrate? And those who say no are the most integrated. So, as much more return migrants, the more return migrants integrate back home, the less they are likely to re-immigrate, and that's sort of a control variables. And just here you see that re-immigration prospect. You see that most of the most of the cases are Armenian returnees that are planning very probably to re-immigrate. Comparing to other nationals for several reasons. So just to conclude, that's our preliminary policy indication, which may be not very so, effective for you, but it's our idea is to bring here some, to think also differently in terms of return migrations and to put emphasis on the aspiration, motivation, etc. Methodologically speaking, but also epistemologically, our empirical evidence suggests that there is a positive correlation between, on the one hand, economic and professional reintegration, and on the other hand, active citizenship and social and family networks. So the maintenance of these networks, family is not always a constraint. It can be a resource that can be mobilized for securing the return back home. Reintegration should be not dealt with as an isolated component detached from the return process. This is what we often see. Often see with studies, also policy action, that just think about the return migrants since the moment they return back home. They don't consider all the migration cycles. And I think this is quite dangerous because otherwise we cannot really understand even the future prospects of this person if we don't take into account that migration is a cycle that starts from before returning. Return is one of the moments. It's not the end of the migration cycle, not necessarily. It's just one of the stage in the migration cycle. And if we consider just the last part of the migration cycle, so the moment where the migrants return back home, we're going to lose some very important information. Field results suggest a positive correlation between decided return and economic and professional reintegration. Let's be clear, we don't use the terms of voluntary returns because there is a misunderstanding there, because most of people think that voluntary return is decided return. Is not necessary. I mean, it is in a way, but because we had this kind of predominant institutional understanding of voluntary return, which has to do with the readmission and expulsion, is not to do with the decision to return, the free decision to return. So when we talk about the decide return, we talk about migrants who planned, who decide, who prepare they return back home. This is a very important concept of return preparedness. Conversely, we saw that abrupt interruption of migration cycle is associated with lower degrees of reintegration. The last point, as a conclusion, is that understanding returnees reintegration requires paying attention to migrants' individual aspiration, motivation, and trajectory. That's the main reason why we came here, because we understood since the beginning, since before we were invited to this conference, of course, so I had checked your questionnaire and your website and the rationale you had. We felt very much familiar with the kind of rationale you're using. We are talking about different, sort of different phenomena sometimes, because you sometimes often refer mainly to skilled migrants, not only, of course, which is an important component, and I understand why. But the idea that you also put emphasis on the aspiration and motivation, let's say, the human contents of these phenomena is very important. It's not just to be, sort of sensitive in terms of social and human affairs, but because it's the reality. Otherwise, you cannot understand how to best perform politics and policies for these return migrants if you don't take seriously into account their decision, their motivation, their aspiration. That's basically all. And you have the website where you can find really lots of information. We just now integrated the several databases. Now we have a database, integrated database with 3,000 cases, and just to let you know, the matrix is composed by more than 700 variables. So the interviews we made, face-to-face interview, they were like on average 1 hour long. So we could collect really a lot of information that I just used a very little part here. So if you are curious, all the descriptive data are already online. And you can also download the complete matrix, let's say the SPSS database from the previous research. I brought some printed copy of the research report of Mirem, which was the research on the Maghreb. We still have elaborating the new one. You can download, of course, because it's online, it's available online, but I just brought some copies for you. Thank you very much, and I'm available for questions or discussion now and later on, of course.
La domanda è, so che sta lavorando fuori con riferimento fuori dall'Unione Europea, però ecco, quale confronto si può fare con la ricerca che noi abbiamo fatto in ambito europeo?
I think, yeah, it's a key question, and I hope we will have time also during the coffee break and dinner to discuss about it. It's not easy to answer now, but my feeling is that we have a lot of common points, even because, as I told you at the beginning, the research now show that there are common patterns of reintegration beyond national context. This is very important, and if you look at the literature on return migrants in Mexico, or even the most recent literature on return migrants in Eastern Europe, they always point to the same kind of patterns, let's say. So it's not and to be, like more inspiring, if you like. I think that if you think beyond the category of return migrants and migrants, our colleague from IOM just presented a very important policy initiative that should be undertaken. But everybody would like to have these policies, not just return migrants. So if we think for a moment that we have lots of common points that are shared by return migrants, but let's say Italians, young generation without job or perspectives in a way, or just most of them share, let's say, return migrants who invested in creating business back home. They have just the same position and vision of that. Can have a foreign direct investors. So I think it's not just we share a lot of things, but also we share both a lot of things with other literature on other kind of groups. We should go beyond these, street categories. Of course, it's important to analyze and to understand return migration, but always to put in a broader context. Otherwise, we don't get benefit from what had been started and found out in addressing the other targets.
I have just one, but during the lunchtime, probably you will explain me better because I'm not so expert to understand in some minutes. Considering your prestigious point of observation, which are the migration cycles you can just mention that are now interesting for Italy and for the Mediterranean? How Italy is affected by which kind of migration cycles, both European and extra-European?
I just give you, because I was impressed, so I want to impress you, maybe you know, but I read from the, actually I didn't read, I just checked it out in the Eurostat, that Italians are, I think, the first national groups in Europe asking for a foreign citizenship in Europe. So we have many Italians, especially young people, they are not just immigrating, they are settling. They are asking for citizenship, foreign citizenship. So we are assisting to a new important phenomenon. It's not just immigrating and going back, but settling in a foreign country. For me, what we learned by far is that if you want to address politics if you want to attract, let's say, the most entrepreneurs, return migrants, you have to think about that people will be probably cross-border actors. So you need cross-border. You use the notion of transnationalities. We use the notion of cross-border, which is more, I think, attached to reality. You need cross-border. These people are cross-border. So for them, it's the terms of all the portability rights, of the social rights that are important issues. But in terms of Italy, I don't see that Italy is giving a perspective to these young people. They will not return. They will return for visiting or to make, sometimes make some jobs or whatever. But they not return, and they are European citizens now, and they're developing European identities. And most of them are guys that made Erasmus when they were young, and they are settling in a new country now. They're asking for citizenship, and Italian is the first national group asking for foreign citizens in Europe.
A good suggestion. Also, considering that this year for the European Commission is the European Year for Citizenship, here we have also somebody who represents this movement of active citizenship. Yes, we are European citizen, and I think that all this information we give also to the program to take into account, and I will take care to transfer also to our representative, because I'm sure our government must take into account, take care of it, because are very serious data and need solutions, or at least needed to be approached in a correct way.
Just to give you a suggestion, always try to correlate, check the trends it's emerging from your survey or from your research, to the kind of degree of trust in political institution in your country. Because this tell you a lot. Because then you can rescue, you can introduce, you can put in your rationale the idea of trust. That people, the pessimistic view I have regarding Italy is because we have been observing a dramatic decline in terms of trust in political institutions. And whether you still have a quite strong trust in the national institution in other countries, you can, maybe expect that issue of trust will be not a big issue for your target to return. That can be a suggestion to look and to use this variable.